You're part of this too. How am I part of it? You'll see.
Hey everybody, it's Hannah Saulic, the head of video here at CinemaBlend, with Sean O'Connell, our managing editor. And Sean, there's a lot going on with DC stuff. It seems almost every day at this point.
Yeah, this is the latest. Now that James Gunn has taken over, it feels like big shoes are dropping every couple of days, and which makes it weird to do videos like this because sometimes we talk about stuff and then it's immediately outdated.
I mean, almost like every hour, it seems like he's like commented to somebody on Twitter or Instagram that like seemingly maybe provides evidence for one theory of how his DC plan is going to go versus another. And so we have four main sort of theories for what we think James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU plan is. So we're going to kind of just run through all four of them, talk about some supporting evidence, maybe some pros and cons of those things, and then just speculate and have fun as we do.
Before we dive into that though, Hannah, I want to talk to you about something.
Oh, God.
Your face gives up a very strong vibe of someone who's hatching schemes.
Do you prefer radio silence from Gunn with regards to this stuff, or do you like him periodically clearing up theories or misconceptions as he goes? Because it fans the flame, but I don't know which one's better for him overall.
Well, okay, I think there's two answers to that question. As far as what I prefer, just as a fan and someone who loves games and like trying to solve things and fan theories in general, I love what he's doing. I wish he does it more. I think it's so fun to sort of like check things off the box, and then you can kind of go like, oh, well, maybe this is where it's going. And I think it's really fun for the discussions that we have selfishly. Yeah. And I love doing that anyway. But for him long term, that is a good question. Like, does it really serve him to be this in the weeds with all this stuff? Right. I don't know. I mean, you don't see Kevin Feige responding about fan theories and all that stuff. So you have to wonder, like, at what point does it not serve him? But I don't think we're at that point right now because they haven't even announced anything. Like, I don't know that he's going to be doing this forever. I hope he does. But like, I don't know that like once there is a plan and it's starting to roll out that he's going to be necessarily as open. But you made a comment last week where you were like, he's just so good at playing the game because he's answering things without actually answering the larger questions that everyone cares about, right? Which is what makes this so interesting.
This means something.
So it's keeping the conversation going and it's keeping the buzz going, which I imagine Warner Brothers is pretty excited about because you don't often hear about Warner Brothers and DC stuff unless it's, you know, negative stuff or Snyder fans doing their thing. So
my only concern is, and I admire the transparency, I think it's a noble way to go, but whatever he is saying in tweets is being treated as gospel.
Follow my orders as holy writ.
And I don't want a decision that comes later that has to be made because of, you know, some technicality or a release date or a production shift, and then people are able to go back to his tweets and say, well, you said this. Like, he should have the freedom to be able to change his mind as he's going through it.
Like our ancestors did.
Well, so James Gunn's tweets auto-delete every few months anyway, as we have seen. And I think James Gunn is the type of, like, any logical person could understand, like, hey, things change, so you have to make different decisions. And he seems like he's very much the person who would if anyone said that to him, would just respond and be like, well, as you can imagine, if A or B happened, we can't do what we originally said. So this is what we're doing. And just like very calmly, like lay things out. Will people take to that? Probably not, but
It's true. And one word that I use often to describe this fan base, Hannah, logical.
I'm gonna kill him.
For all fan communities. Oh, gosh.
Fair. All right, fair. I just took a swipe at you guys. I'm sorry.
Ha ha ha.
All right, let's
It's all
go.
out of
Some
love.
theories.
It'll be fun.
Oh, actually, we should note that like when we're talking about these things, we're excluding, at least in these first two theories, anything that has to do with Mat Reeves Batverse. All right, let's start with theory one, which is one of the most obvious possibilities of what James Gunn and Peter Safran could be planning, which is just a complete reboot. The DCEU, as it was called, nothing from that is going to survive. We're going to completely start over with a new universe, new actors in these characters' roles. No one from Suicide Squad, no one from Peacemaker, none of the Snyder people, blank slate.
I am
the ends of worlds.
And the evidence of this, most obviously, is the Henry Cavill news, which has confirmed that he is not coming back. Gal Gadot and even Black Adam, there are in those statements a couple of words you could nitpick to say like, oh, well, it leaves the door open for the future. So I'm not going to include that as like evidence here, but I think James Gunn saying that he's going to write a new Superman movie that takes place earlier than what we've seen with a new actor is pretty solid evidence that they are potentially planning just a clean slate. What do you think?
It's the as you say, cleanest way for them to legitimately start over is to just close the door on what existed, corner it off as this is what we tried to do from this year to this year, and now moving forward we're gonna do something completely different, and here's how we are restarting. It means new faces of the very familiar characters. It does mean a couple of things are going to get cut short, and it means that he's going to have to make some difficult personal decisions, because I don't think you can keep things like Peacemaker and Suicide Squad because they were yours and they're your buddies, right, kind of thing. That opens yourself up to a lot of scrutiny. I think if you're going to do this, you wipe the entire slate clean and you start over from scratch.
You're talking about genocide.
Yes, and I'm arguing its merits with a ghost.
He did say on Twitter, surprise, surprise, why every time I click a Twitter link, it takes me to like a Google Chrome page that says it can't open it. Sorry. It's loading.
It's for your own safety.
Fair. So someone said, recasting all the main DCEU characters, but keeping some. Will be interesting how Peacemaker and Suicide Squad characters / actors live on, but the others don't, ? Particularly when they have all interacted together. And James Gunn responded and said, I keep seeing posts with this untrue theory. We're not recasting everyone except the Suicide Squad, which can mean one of two things. One, the reboot, as you're talking about, and two, something that we'll get to in the next theory. But so that right, tweet could support this theory of a reboot, is basically my point.
And we're, getting into the pros and cons of this approach. Like, one of the pros of it is it's literally giving you a blank page to start to push your vision through. I think any remnants of the previous regime allow people to continue to scrutinize what survived and what didn't, and why did you choose this over that. But if you just line in the sand, this is where the old regime ended and everything moving forward is going to be our vision and our plan. That's the pro of doing it.
This is a second chance for all of Krypton.
Yeah, and I think another important pro of this is just, if you're going to start a universe, you would ideally want to do that with actors that you could see starring in your projects for the next 10 years if they're truly following the Marvel scheme. And if you've got, Superman, Wonder Woman, all of your Trinity is like getting up there, that doesn't leave you with a lot of flexibility to keep these characters appearing for years and years to come.
You're getting slow in your old age, Alfred.
Comes to us all, Master Wayne.
And then the con, of course, is there are a lot of actors and cast members who people love and think work really well, and you're doing that thing where you're essentially cutting them short of us figuring out how their storyline might have worked out, what their future could have looked like. And I'm not even just saying Henry in general. Like, I am saying John Cena in Peacemaker. I am saying Margot as Harley. There's a lot of people who we would like to see continue, but all of it may go the wayside of poor Leslie Grace and her Batgirl project of Warner Brothers just saying plug is pulled.
You know the deal.
Also, this is kind of like a side theory.
We're diverting.
Yeah.
Who's to say that a complete DCU reboot in 10 years we're not getting like a No Way Home situation where all of a sudden you've got Henry Cavill popping up with the other Superman?
Hi.
Well, you can legitimately do a Kingdom Come story where older Superman is a factor.
I'm here to help.
But this is why when Henry or, Dwayne Johnson say, Dwayne Johnson's wording was extremely interesting, where he said Black Adam is not going to be part of this first stage of storytelling or first chapter of storytelling.
But part of me wonders how much of that is like The Rock just doing the Rock thing where he puts a positive spin on everything, and like
possible.
Because Gal Gadot also used the word chapter, which is interesting. She said, can't wait
Yeah.
to share with you her next chapter.
Well, Gal's was also paired with Patty Jenkins saying, hey, my version of Wonder Woman is not moving forward.
Right.
You know, these things all point to me to a closure of the universe that existed. Patty's vision for where she wanted the character to go, it conflicts with what they're going to do. The Rock, even though he just launched Black Adam, is not part of what they want to do. Henry Cavill, even though he was telling everybody he's back, is not part of what they want to do, which says to me that what they want to do is reboot the universe.
If we're gonna do this, we're gonna need to be open to more things.
Let's dive right into the second theory, which is a combined universe of kind of new and existing from the old DCEU. And this is where we get into this gray area, I think, of what the 3 remaining films are going to be, right? Like, because we don't know how Shazam factors into this. We don't know what is going to happen in The Flash and whether The Flash is going to have an impact on how things go moving forward. And then Jason Momoa as Aquaman.
Atlanteans can be tricky.
For Peacemaker season 2, like, do you think there's a world in which they're rebooting where they just don't release that?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm backing up. I don't
Okay.
think for this reason and the questions that you just brought up that they're even gonna announce until at least after Shazam is done with its theatrical run. Like this whole like we're gonna tell you more in the new year, like that doesn't necessarily mean like in January we're gonna know what's going on. They might wait
Right.
until all of this stuff so that brings people to the theaters.
And to make money.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Are they going to wait until Flash has dropped and
Or
revealed
even
what
like
it's doing?
they could the new year, they technically could wait till after Aquaman if they really wanted to be cruel.
No,
You really are out of your mind.
I think he's.
I
gotta come
don't
out
think
with
they'll
something
do
longer than
that. No.
He
They're
can't
going to need to start
sustain
getting
the
stuff
Twitter
in
pressure.
development anyway. So they're going to
Yeah.
have to start casting news and all that stuff.
Superman.
Let's get into a really interesting person who is an unknown in this, which is Ezra Miller. Because I want to approach it from this perspective: that movies that make a lot of money, the studio wants to continue exploring them. And James Wan's Aquaman made a lot of money. You know, James Wan's Aquaman sequel could end up making a lot of money. What if The Flash is a $1 billion earner? Now, who knows? I think Andy Muschietti is a very talented filmmaker. I think they've had a lot of opportunity to work on this movie in post-production. And while the prevailing narrative on it is that it's a disaster behind the scenes, there have been prevailing narratives on movies that have been disasters behind the scenes that come out and are actually great.
You never know what's going to happen in this city. I mean, oh my gosh, right?
Are they going to want to chalk this up as, hey, that did really great, but we're rebooting this universe? Or is Warner Brothers going to turn around and say to James Gunn, in a way, hey, figure out how to make that continue because people really liked it. You know, you got Keaton coming back as Batman.
Yeah.
You're going to have the introduction of a Supergirl. Like, are we introducing the Supergirl so she goes nowhere? Like, what? There's a lot of factors
so-
at play with Flash that we're not discussing.
Do you think, and that raises a question, like, obviously they've had that conversation, right? It's a business after all. But
Sure.
do you, like, that makes me wonder, like, how much of what their plan is do you think is actually set in stone? Like, do you think that maybe before they're completely solidifying what the rules are of these timelines and all this stuff, that they're waiting for that? Or do you think that they have like, no, we know what we're gonna do, and like that kind of is what it is over there? If they might tell us to pivot later, but like we're on this track.
Well, my answer to that feeds us into our third theory, which is that in theory number 3, the DCU becomes a multiple universe type scenario, or like an Elseworlds kind of thing.
How many alternate timelines?
All of them.
Which leads me to believe that through the course of The Flash, they have given James Gunn the opportunity that he needs to establish a DC universe that takes place in multiple universes.
Embody the best of both worlds.
You know, that gives you as a creative a wide open palette to then say there's a Mat Reeves Earth, you know, that's going to continue on in this way. This new Superman movie that I'm writing, it doesn't negate the Man of Steel universe, but it takes place on a different Earth.
And
know,
you could
in
start
a
to
way,
build the DCU moving forward from the Earth that James Gunn's Superman is on, and then that would, totally still allow. Because he did say Elseworlds projects are actively happening, which to me signaled like, oh, does he consider Batverse to be Elseworlds, considering what he said a few weeks ago about not incorporating Mat Reeves Batverse into the wider DCU plan. So like that would totally allow the Flash, Aquaman, Shazam to still exist and come out and be those stories. And same with, you know what? I think this is what's probably happening if I had to put money on it.
I'll give you one other project that's pending that makes me think that this is the way that they're going. And when they announce it, this is what they're going to get is the Joker sequel with Joaquin.
I always forget
Lady
about
Gaga.
Joker.
Yeah,
I don't know
know
why. Yeah.
But you can just say, because the concept of the Elseworlds is essentially...
Oh yeah, can you explain that for people who might not know that jargon?
Sure. It's a version of the comics, typically a graphic novel or like a short arc of story that doesn't have to fit into any existing continuity. And usually it's like because somebody wants to take a character and so drastically change them that you don't want to have to deal with the problems that it would create. So you could take Batman and drop him into like the Charles Dickens era,
Barbie,
you know, and he goes, you could if you wanted to.
Stop her.
What if Batman tracked down Jack the Ripper? Great story. I would want to read that, you know, but how are you going to factor that into where we are in contemporary times? Well, you can't. Well, then they called it this Elseworld type thing. And that's exactly what I think they're setting up. Like they have Mat Reeves doing what he wants to do with Batman, but without it affecting a continuity. They have Todd Phillips doing what they want with Joker, but it not affecting a continuity. And then we have, you know, these other solo projects that are coming out that can be just part of their existing multiverses. The issue that it comes up with, I think, is that the audience, like, I guess the audience is going to want to know which timeline or multiverse they're going to want to spend the most time paying attention to. Because if you are investing in, say, the existing Jason Momoa Aquaman franchise, right? Do you think that DC is going to allow more stories to be told in that universe? Or
I think that's going to be like how they soft close that. And they're not completely shutting the door on like, you will never ever see Jason Momoa or any of these actors as these people again after these projects that were already in whatever various stages of production. And that would allow them to maybe sort of not completely piss people off. It'll still make people mad. But that would be like a soft close. And then I think they say, like, instead of calling it like a clean slate reboot, they're going to say, but this world is the world that we are focusing on. And maybe it's the world that like Sasha Calle's Supergirl is from. Like, and that's how they tie that. Like, I don't know. But I think that's a lot more likely, and that would allow them to not necessarily say a hard no to anything. And I think now too, sorry to keep bringing in Marvel, damn it, but I think audiences, general ones is what I'm talking about, they're sophisticated enough now with No Way Home, which was a huge hit, and like a lot of the Marvel projects that are introducing the idea of like multiple timelines, that like that's not necessarily like a confusing thing to sell anymore, you know?
Right.
Like 10 years ago, if you were like, yeah, we're gonna start this with a bunch of different universes, studios would be like, what? No. But we're not in that place anymore.
Right,
So,
we've come a long way. And it's not only just the multiverses that exist in the Marvel universe, but it's the ability for them to, like with an Elseworld project, let's say they wanted to cast Lobo and put Jason Momoa in Lobo, but set it in the distant future. It wouldn't be too different from Marvel doing a special presentation of Werewolf by Night. Like all of a sudden you're dropping in this story that takes place in the 1930s or 1940s, and nobody bats an eye because you're just like, oh, Marvel's just doing this one-off. And it doesn't have to, it's not going to affect the larger timeline. In fact, it's not connected to it in a way. And fans are largely okay with that. You know, they just roll with it.
And you could do that with like a Wonder Woman 3 in a few years if you wanted to, and bring back Gal, even if it's not the Wonder Woman that's going to be in James Gunn's new Earth with his younger Superman. You know what I mean? Like that would allow you, and like it would allow you to your point, do something like Aquaman 3 if that really made a bunch of money, or continue whatever the Flash does. Like, I think that makes the most sense, and just with story gives them the most opportunity without boxing themselves in, because if you officially say like we're clean slate rebooting, or like this is a mixed universe, you're putting parameters around story that you might not want to your earlier point, stick yourself to in the future. So
well, this brings us to theory number 4, which is
perfect.
a little bit what I'm buying into, and in a way explains the concept of the Elseworld, but just in a larger universe. I've heard it described in a way that the DC model moving forward is going to be more akin to what Star Wars is doing nowadays than what Marvel is doing, because in Marvel everything has the ability to sort of crisscross,
right.
But in Star Wars right now, by accident or by design, and I think it's by accident, everything falls under the Star Wars umbrella, but they're not forced to connect, right? Like you can have the adventures of Rey and Poe and Finn taking place, but you could also have the Mandalorian taking place, and they're both Star Wars, but they don't have to, we're not expecting them to connect.
Hey, wait a minute.
But like that's still, as far as like a timeline or universe question, like do you still think that if they took this Star Wars approach, they would need to define like what the rules of universes are? Like if you have the Penguin series and then you have Peacemaker season 2, like do you think they just put stuff like that out there without needing to answer the question of like where are we and what universe is it, kind of a thing, and you can just enjoy the story as is?
Yeah, that's a good question, because at least on the Star Wars narrative, there is a timeline,
right,
that we're essentially following.
The foundation has to be built on something.
So I guess that's a con of this approach, is that you would still need, it doesn't get you out of the conundrum of having to answer that larger universe question eventually.
Because in this instance, in the Star Wars instance, I'm just now realizing it's not like you could, although they did have a young Han Solo played by a different actor, but it's not like we've seen multiple people play Luke Skywalker.
But then like part of me wonders, like for general audiences, does anyone care? Because like if I'm talking to just like a random person on the street and I'm like, yeah, Colin Farrell's gonna be in a Penguin series on HBO Max or whatever the new thing is, and they're like, oh cool, is that connected to like Ben Affleck? And then you just go no, and then they're like, oh okay.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, are we overthinking that like any of this even I mean, like I know it probably matters to James Gunn from just wanting to create a story, but like, do you think all of these definitions and things like even really need to be defined for any, like, do you know what I mean?
We 100% are overthinking it.
Well, yes.
I'll give you a case in point. Your father sat next to you during Black Adam and thought he was watching a Marvel movie.
This is true. Yes.
The general consensus, the general audience does not necessarily care to this level. I think for the most part, they just want to be entertained. So do you think there's a world where James Gunn
just goes, we're not putting a label on it? Or no, because he's also a fan himself. He would probably want to.
He could. It would again remove the barriers that come with how do you define this kind of thing. Like, what if the plan, the DC Bible that he hands over is just, we're gonna make good movies. I don't really care if they're connected or not. Somebody comes at me with a good idea. Yeah, here you go. Yo, you got a Green Lantern idea? Here you go. Go make it. Make it entertaining. Go cast the right people.
And then if people are like, well, is this connected? He'd be like, I don't know. Is it? And then
I don't know. Doesn't matter. Movies don't have to be connected. When Richard Donner made the first Superman, he wasn't concerned if it was going to connect to anything else. He just made a good movie. Sat down and made a good movie. Tim Burton's Batman is considered one of the best Batman movies ever made. One of the biggest comic book movies ever made, and he never once thought about how it connected to anything. He made the movie that he wanted to make. Let's go back to those days.
And get as far away from this place as you can.
And if the story one day dictates that the characters come together in a no way home situation.
And theoretically, Bruce said something about you having to take us all to brunch?
Stop! Stop it!
I think the best way forward for them, as we both sort of came to the conclusion, I think at the same time, was that the Elseworld thing is a way for them to go. It's multiverse. You're not forcing connections. It allows, in a way, the best story to win. But if you do it in a multiverse situation, you also give yourself the possibility that somewhere down the line, Mat Reeves' Batman could potentially meet the new. Yeah, exactly.
Or that.
Oh God, who would want it?
Well, I do.
Because here's the thing, Hannah, and this is what goes to sort of show that no one knows anything, but even when they say they know stuff, it's not true. When Henry Cavill made his video saying I'm back as Superman, he believed it. He legitimately believed what he was being told. And then a couple of weeks later, he was told that that's not true anymore. So whatever we know now, we could believe to know and have it believed to be true. And it might never happen. Everyone who worked on a Batgirl movie believed that that movie was coming out. And then one day they were told it isn't. And that's this industry.
The moral of the story is don't trust anyone.
Anyone.
Cut it out with the introspection.
Everything we just said
It's useless.
Or it might be accurate.
Or it might be.
But it also might not be.
He doesn't know.
I think that's what
these
makes
videos.
this fun, though. I know. That's.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. And I'm excited to see what James brings us in 2023. Just put me on the earth where Blue Beetle is. I'm gonna stay there. I got a poster for it the other day. A poster for Blue Beetle of all things showed up at my house, and I was like, DC, you never cease to amaze me.
Full
This
of
is what you
surprises.
said. Full of surprises. And that's why, folks, we're going to continue making videos like this for the foreseeable future because, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of this, there's always something new happening in the world of DC. So keep it here on CinemaBlend. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, turn on your notifications. Whenever Hannah puts up one of these fantastic videos, you guys will be the first ones to come on over here and watch it.